King Robert died as the lamps guttered and the sea winds pressed their salt breath through the lattice, turning the long curtains into slow, pale ghosts. The chamber smelled of strong wine and poultice and the last hot sting of boar. Ned Stark sat by the bed with the will folded beneath his palm and let the silence fall over him like first snow. The king's hand had been heavy on his, the words slurred but clear enough. The words had made him Lord Protector, guardian of realm and children until Stannis should come to claim what the law named his. When Robert's chest ceased its weary rise and fall, when the great bull neck slackened and the glaze of death stilled the eyes he had known since youth, the Northman closed them and bowed his head. It was not in him to weep there. He folded the blanket up to Robert's beard and rose with the weight of one who has already begun to suffer the judgments of his choices. Outside the door, Ser Barristan Selmy stood like a white tree carved from winter, helm plumed, face grave. In the hall beyond, Lancel Lannister, pale as whey and trembling with the dregs of popped wineskins, looked quickly away. Ned put the parchment into a leather case and bound it with his hand's seal. "Ser Barristan," he said, voice steady in the dim, "you will summon the remaining brothers of your order to the throne room at daybreak. The king is gone. The realm must be set to rights." Barristan's head dipped, the courtesy of a knight who has known too many passings to feign surprise at one more. "As you command, Lord Stark. Post men at this door. No one enters save the Grand Maester, and not without you present." "Aye." Ned's limp had worsened since the street, and the stone of the tower remembered the weight of his footfalls. He sent Tomard running for Varys and for the Lord Commander of the City Watch. He sent Desmond to secure the armory and the gates of the Red Keep. He sent Jax to find Island Payne and have him stand ready in the yard at first light. Orders spread like lantern light down a midnight street. Every step he took felt like an act of war, which perhaps it was. But war had already come to him, beating at his door in gilded gauntlets, when Ser Jaime Lannister and his redcloaks set on them in the market, when Jory lay dying with blood on his lips. If a war must come, let it come with the law at his back and purpose before him. Littlefinger was waiting in the council chamber, a thin smile carving his face into something pleasant and amused. Varys came in on whisper-soft slippers and folded hands, a myrish moth. Pycelle shuffled, beard braided with oils, breathing like a bellows. Renly was absent. He had taken his green cloaks and vanished into the night. There had been talk, breathless and earnest, of a sudden strike to seize Cersei and the children. Ned had refused then, bound by that old hard line he would not cross. But the line had shifted under him, and the man who had moved it had just died. "The king sleeps," Littlefinger asked lightly. "King Robert is dead," Ned said, and the words sounded like iron falling. "By his last decree, I am Lord Protector, until the rightful heir shall take the throne." Pycelle wheezed. Varys lowered his lids. Littlefinger's eyes brightened with some private game. "Ah," he said, "and who is the rightful heir in your austere north, my lord? Names make fortunes." "Lord Stannis Baratheon," Ned said. "By law and blood, letters will go at dawn. The council will hold the realm in trust until his arrival." "Cersei will have an opinion," Varys murmured, and glanced toward the window where the first hint of pale pre-dawn bled through the glass. "Cersei Lannister will obey the law," Ned said, "as will every man who would call himself a subject of this realm." He let that hang, then turned to the eunuch. "How many gold cloaks are in the city?" 8,000 on paper," Varys said. "Perhaps half that would answer a sudden call." "Call them. They will assemble in the throne room at daybreak, with Commander Slint to receive my orders." "Janos Slint," Littlefinger said, as if tasting the wine of the name. "Strong man, surely loyal to whoever holds his purse." "Mine holds the crown's purse," Ned said, "and the crown will pay its men for crown's work." Littlefinger's smile only widened. "As you say, Ser Jaime Lannister is in the city," Ned said, and watched them because they were men who thought themselves masters of knowledge. Varys blinked once too slowly. Pycelle fumbled a finger through his beard. Littlefinger tapped his sleeve, a merchant's tell. "He set steel on the king's hand," Ned said. He slew Jory Castle and broke the peace of the city. He will be seized and made to answer. Send word. Jaime Lannister is to be taken and held. If he resists, he is to be struck down. Spread the word to every post in the keep. Ser Jaime has friends, Littlefinger said too mildly. Then they will avail him little against the law, Ned answered. He had told himself this already a dozen times, and now he made himself believe it. There are men so apt for legend that the world twists to accommodate them. Ser Jaime's beauty had carved his impunity. He had killed a king and been forgiven because the man he had killed was hated, because he was golden, because he was a Lannister, and Jory lay cold. The first gray light found the vast halls of the Red Keep alive with footsteps. Ned moved like the hub of a turning wheel, with Tomard to his right and Desmond to his left, and Varley and Allen for the work that required a good sword. The gold cloaks came in rustling formations, breastplates gleaming when torches caught them, faces wary but eager. The city was a beast that thrilled to the scent of change. Janos Slynt came with them, thick-necked and sure of his importance. He bowed with a stiffness that wasn't submission and stared as if measuring how much of a man's weight a small knife might handle if it was pressed just so. Ned gave him orders, clipped and plain. Secure the gates. Double the watches on the river, the Mud Gate, the King's Gate. No one leaves the city without warrant. The Tower of the Hand, the royal apartments, the armory, the kitchens, postmen. Disarm any man who shows Lannister crimson in the keep. Slynt listened, face unreadable. Littlefinger stood nearby, tapping the pommel of a dagger as though bored. Varys drifted to the margins and absorbed. The Kingsguard came like a snowfall. Ser Barristan first, silent as marble. Ser Boros blunt, thick as the walls he loved to guard. Ser Meryn Trant, his lips pinched. Ser Aerys Oakhart, young and fair and uncertain. Sandor Clegane did not wear white, but he was there behind Joffrey's sullen mouth and narrow eyes. The boy prince looked sleep-lagged and ready to spit. Cersei arrived in gold and emeralds, hair loose like a banner, Lancel hovering behind as if his hand could be her shadow. Myrcella clutched a maiden's pillow. Tommen's cheeks were doughy with sleep. The throne loomed empty behind them, a tangle of old swords and old stories. Ned stood before it with Barristan at his left and the great above the lesser. "The king is dead," he said, and the hush that fell was different than the hush in Robert's chamber. "By his hand, he named me protector of the realm. Before all, I say it now, Lord Stannis Baratheon is rightful heir. We shall hold this city and the realm for him." Cersei's eyes widened a fraction, then narrowed to sharpened green. She smiled the way knives smile. "You dare prate law to me, Stark? The law is steel. The law is who sits that chair." "By law," Ned said. "Your son Joffrey is not the king." There it was. A ripple passed through the hall, and someone's finger tapped metal, and the air thinned to knives. Littlefinger looked pleased, as at a good throw of dice. Varys did not move at all. "Arrest Ser Jaime Lannister," Ned said, and his voice carried like a spear thrown far. "For murder, for assault upon the hand of the king, for breach of the king's peace." His own men moved. The gold cloaks hesitated and then came on with them. Barristan raised a hand, and the white swords obeyed, dividing like poured milk around Cersei's brood. "Where is my brother?" Cersei said, and it startled Ned that her voice was not a shout but a soft-breathed thing. "Where is he?" "Here," said a voice that carried its own flame. Ser Jaime Lannister stood on the far side of the throne steps, flanked by 2 red cloaks who had no time to be uncertain before 100 gold cloaks and Stark men were between them and any door. He had come armored, gilded plates catching firelight, his hair a bright thread in the gloom. His expression was boredom's cousin, amused at the rude jest of being cornered. "Lord Stark," he said, as if this were a meeting at a hunt, "I hear you call me murderer. I've been called worse and by men of better taste." Ned felt the old cold steady him. Rage was a poor captain where law must sail. "Sir, you will yield your sword and come with us. This is not a matter for show." "I suppose you think me very stupid," Jaime said. He tipped his chin toward Barristan. You'll let this old man arrest me, will you? Perhaps he remembers another king's chamber. Enough, Barristan said, and there was a sword's rasp in the single word that silenced men who were sworn to die to keep him from being silenced. Ser Jaime, by order of the Lord Protector, yield your steel. Yield, Jaime smiled. To a traitor who would hand my sister's children to a crabbed, humorless usurper on Dragonstone? Where is the honor in that, Lord Stark? You forfeited honor when you spilled Jory's blood, Ned said. Jaime's eyes flickered. For one instant, there was a crack in the gold mask, and something human looked out. Something that had laughed as a boy and had held a woman's hand in a quiet place. Your man fought well, he said. I gave him that much. For what value is that gift, when given by the hand that killed him? Ned asked. The room was full of steel. The red cloaks arched like cats as the gold cloaks bristled near them. The hound's face was a melted sneer. Boros Blunt's eyes were greedy for spectacle. Marin Trant's fingers were twitching a tremor of habit. Yield, Barristan said again. Jaime watched him. The Kingslayer's gaze shifted once to Cersei, once to Joffrey, and then back to Barristan with a little shrug that conceded something to the old man only. He drew his sword and turned it in his hand, presenting the hilt. The blade was so clean that the meager dawn reflected in it. I have yielded, he said. Take me to your dull little justice, Stark. But understand this. You'll teach the realm that a Lannister's blood may be spilled in the city and no lightning will split the sky. Remember the storm you invite. The yard was still wet with the night when they brought him out. The air had sharpened to a new day. The wall walks bore curious men, and women who had risen early to hawk their wares paused with baskets in hand. Little birds of rumor had flown faster than any raven. The king's justice stood with his great sword resting on the pavers like a third leg. His face was a blank coin. Jaime mounted the low block with a careless grace, as if this, too, were a matter of ceremony, not consequence. I never liked dawn, he said. The light is so honest. He smiled then, and his smile was almost boyish. Do I have leave for last words, my Lord Protector? This is a comedy, after all. Ned couldn't hear the sea from the yard, but he knew it was there, the same tide that had borne Robert away from his shore of life. He thought of Bran's small hands, of Arya's scowls, of Sansa's soft laughter when content, of Robb's earnestness, of Catelyn's steady stern mouth. He had chosen a road, and this was the first stone of it. Say what you will, sir. We mark men by the stories they leave, Jaime said. I killed a king who would have killed a city. I cut the throat of a madness that wanted wildfire in the bellies of babes. And your friend made me less than what I did. He named me for what my sword cut, not for those it saved. You will say that's not the law. Very well. This little justice is yours. He looked to the far wall, to a place where Cersei stood behind a curtain with her hand pressed white against the stone. Sister, he called, so softly that perhaps only Ned heard it. There are debts you will never pay. Let them go. Then his eyes found Ned again. If there is any mercy in you, Stark, any at all, keep your children out of this throne. It will eat them. The blade fell. The sound was dull and immediate, no music. Gold hair darkened on the wet stones. There was a gasp like a wave that breaks but does not topple the boat. Ned stood with his hands behind his back and made himself witness it. He had once left a boy kneeling in snow, with a cold sword in his hand and the duty of a blow. He had taught his sons that the man who gives the sentence should swing the sword. Here, the king's justice had that duty. Ned had not taken it, and he wondered if he had made his first flaw in this new work by sparing himself the weight. The head was covered. The body was taken away. The city absorbed and would digest what it had seen. But the realm was a larger beast than the city. When Cersei stormed into the council chamber, her fury came sheathed. Her hair was tamed into a war queen's cascade, her gown armor-bright, her mouth like something carved. No tears. Ned would have trusted tears more. She sat without leave and leaned back as if she owned the chair. You will die for that, she said evenly. Not today and not by my hand. But you have made war upon my house, and a wolf's skull cannot be mailed forever. Your brother made war upon this city, Ned said. He killed my man in the streets and threatened the peace under the king's nose. This is justice. She smiled without amusement. Justice? Sir Island Pain is your justice. This is a butcher's yard. You have slain the best sword in the West. Her eyes glittered. Do you know what you have called up? Northman? My father is a simple man in his way. He kills without flourish. He sends ravens and men, and he kills. He will scour the riverlands clean and come for you, and there will be no songs left to cover what you have bidden. The law will hold, Ned said, even as the words felt like a raft nailed together in a storm. Lord Stannis comes. The realm will have a lawful king. My son is king, she said too quickly. He is Robert's heir. He is not Robert's son. He said it simply. The room seemed to draw breath around the words. She did not flinch. You are very brave to say that with my boys in the castle. Sansa and Arya are under Stark protection, Ned said. No harm will come to your children, nor mine, while I rule here. Rule? Her laugh was small and deadly. You think you rule? Peter, tell him. Littlefinger lifted a hand, as if to remind them he had one. My lord, he said with his amiable peddler's air. The gold cloaks are good men, but they are city men. Their loyalty hangs from their belts. Purse strings, how to say it, tug. Your honor is a hard coin. Their purses prefer softer currency. Ned did not look away from Cersei when he spoke. Commander Slint, he said, has been paid. The crown has discharged its debts to his men in full, with a bonus for loyal service. We will pay again, and I will not entrust the safety of the city to a man who can be bought out from under me. He looked past her finally, to a squire waiting by the door. Fetch Commander Slint. They waited in the small clatter of Varys's quiet breathing and Pycelle's phlegm. Slint came in grinning, caught sight of the men gathered, and bowed hastily. His grin tripped on the sight of Ser Barristan, but he fell into his bow again and straightened with too much confidence not to be rehearsed. Commander, Ned said, you have served the city these many years. The crown thanks you. You will go now to the castles upon the Rivergate, and you will hold them with 50 men until Lord Stannis' arrival. Ser Desmond will oversee the watches within the keep. His Grace. He had to stop. His Grace was dead. The late kings will invest me with authority to make this charge. You are relieved of direct command within the Red Keep. Slint's eyes cooled a degree, and the thickness of his neck colored. He opened his mouth. Littlefinger shifted his weight. Cersei's eyelids flickered. Ned gave them no room to speak. Your men will be paid double for the next month. If any man refuses this new order, he will be replaced and the day's wage denied him. See it done. Slint swallowed and bowed again. He had an instinct for wind. He left with his heels clacking too loud. Littlefinger's expression thinned to something sharper and unreadable. Cersei rose, and all that she was, beautiful, fearsome, wronged, wronging, stood with her. You take food from my hand and stone my house with it, she said softly. Do you know my father? She did not wait for his answer. You will. We all will, Ned said. And we will meet him as the law. She went. She went not like a woman defeated, but one who had moved a piece that would not show its consequence until later. Varys watched her go with a pity that may have been real. The small council dissolved in murmurs. Pycelle to his herbs, Littlefinger to his ledgers, Varys to his webs. Barristan remained. You have killed a knight of the Kingsguard, he said, as if stating whether. Never in living memory has that been done at another's command. It will be taken for blood feud. I have killed a murderer, Ned said. I did it for Jory, and for the city he profaned by the violence of his men, and because law must be steel as well as ink. Barristan was quiet for a long breath. Law is a blade that cuts the one who draws it at times. I held Ares's guard. I failed a city once by serving its king. You may forgive me if I grow wary of killing knights in the name of any king. "I'll not ask for your forgiveness," Ned said, "but I'll accept your counsel. Will you serve the realm now, as you swore?" "I swore to protect the king," Barristan said. "I will stand in white for the lawful king, not a boy propped on false claim." "Then we are allies," Ned said. He sent the ravens. Some were swift enough to seem to have flown before he loosed them, to Dragonstone for Stannis with the full text of Robert's will and the genealogies, to Storm's End in case Renly changed his mind, to Winterfell, to Riverrun, to White Harbor and Gulltown and the Knights of the Crownlands who were looking everywhere for the scent of advantage. He sent men to guard the ships for the royal children, because he would not have them stolen away in Red. He tripled the guard on Sansa and Arya, not to keep them within, but to keep the world from coming in at them with claws. Arya ate with her hands and watched with wide eyes as the household sharpened into its war shape. When he kissed her hair, she asked, blunt as a good sword, "Will there be fighting, father?" "There may," he said. "Can I come?" "You can learn," he said. "And remember what you learn. That is a kind of fighting we need now." She scowled but nodded and went back to poking holes in a crust with the point of a knife he wished were a spoon. Sansa's silence was a more terrible thing. She moved through corridors like a wraith, her face pale and fine as porcelain, her mouth a perfect thing that had forgotten how to open. When he came to her, he saw grief as clean and cutting as any he had ever known. The death of a girl's story. He sat and did not speak for a long while. When she finally managed words, they were soft and ruined. "He was a Kingsguard," she said. "A true Nigh. He killed Jory," Ned said quietly, "and he would have killed me in the street, for pride." She swallowed. Her eyes shone and did not spill. "Joffrey says you want to send him away, and he is the prince, and he is very brave, and I love him, father." There it was, the dagger he could not forbid from piercing, because it had been given to her by the world with ribbons tied. He took it as best he could. "The truth does not change because someone you love says it isn't so," he said gently. "You will not be made to marry him. That is not a cruelty I will give you." Her breath hitched. Once. She did not cry. She turned her face away and he saw her mouth harden. He had not saved her from hurt, only given her a different shape of it. That would be his ledger, always. On the rotting bridge of the Ares sky cells, a man with mismatched eyes heard news from a cellsward with an easy grin. Tyrion Lannister sat with his knees drawn up and let the information settle, heavy as iron. His brother's head fallen into straw. His father's rage called up like something from the deep. He drank the good wine Bronn had found and looked into the cup's red dark, as if it were a glass that could show him consequences as clearly as faces. "Well," Bronn said, kicking a foot out over mist and mountain air, "your lion's head's been shorn. What will your lord father do, you think?" "Kill until he feels less alive," Tyrion said, and the humor felt stale in his mouth. He suspected there was a portion of himself that had always believed Jaime's golden immunity would profit him as well. To be born a Lannister was to be born into an armory of shields, wealth, beauty, terror, alliances. Remove the best sword in the armory and the shields felt thinner. He thought of Cersei, and his heart did something painful and strange. "He will put the Riverlands to the sword," Tyrion said. "He will pull lords to heel and bribe those he cannot beat quickly, and then he will come for the city." He smiled without meaning it. "If Stark is not dead before he gets there." "Stark's got the city," Bronn said, as if it were a coin in a pocket. "Cities are slippery," Tyrion said. "They run through fingers. We'll go to my father. My sister will forgive me the slight of being late, when I bring her thinking she needs." He rose, bones protesting. "You, friend Bronn, will be richer than a Septon is virtuous." By the time Tyrion came stumbling into his father's war tent, dust up to his knees and the mountain men at his back like a pack of half-tamed dogs, Lord Tywin Lannister had already begun his answer. Fire ran in a line across a map of the Riverlands. The line of the Marbrand riders, the line of Ser Amory Lorch, the line that was Gregor Clegane like a slash scar across a cheek. The air smelled of wax, steel, and the efficient rage of powerful men. Tywin did not embrace his son. He did not even look softened. He looked the way a tower does when you realize it was built with murder in it. "You are late," he said. "I was busy educating a few lords about the hazards of throwing dwarfs from tall places," Tyrion said, and smiled until his father's flat stare leached even that compulsion from him. "Jaime," he said then, and let the joke die. Tywin's voice did not change. "Your brother is dead because a northern fool thinks himself an instrument of fate." He pointed to the map, to a place near the tumblestone. "We will do the work men do when fate is invoked. We will grind his friends to dust. We will put the Stark boy in the field and break him, and then we will send the boy's head to King's Landing wrapped in the pelt of his direwolf. And I will watch Stark read that letter and see if he thinks his law is steel then." He touched another mark. "Ser Kevin will take 6,000 for the Golden Tooth and hold it. Adam will burn out the raiders in the Blackwater Vale. Someone has been brave or foolish or both." His mouth curled. "You will take command of a portion of the levies and make certain the men who must be bribed do not think of switching coats for the Stark boy's sake." "Me," Tyrion said, "how your fortunes rise." His father's eyes were green coins. "You want place in my house. You will take the place your brother is not here to fill. You will prove yourself useful. And King's Landing? What of it?" Tywin looked towards it as if a castle of gossip and gold could offend the senses. "Cersei will hold or she will not. Stark believes solemnly in paper. He will not kill children. And Cersei has children." Tyrion thought of Joffrey and wondered for the first time whether the boy would choose life if offered the wall, or choose pride and find a sword. He had never liked the choice. He had also never thought a Stark would force it. He looked down at the map again and saw, for the first time, how many small fires a great fire required to stay bright. "Very well," he said. "I will be useful." North, the ravens arrived in Winterfell through a sky so clean and cold it bit. Robb Stark read the words once, then again, and then his hands clenched and unclenched, as if the text might fight him if he did not show it he could fight back. Catelyn held the parchment after him with a mother's face that had had too many new lines carved into it. Ned lived and had done a thing that could not be undone. She thought of the boy who had pressed a sword into the hands of a man she had never loved and told him he must take the head he had judged. She thought of the man who had seen that boy alone in snow and had gone to him. She had known the strength in Ned. She had not known the ruthlessness he could make into law. It frightened and relieved her in equal measure. It meant he might live. "The banners," Robb said, almost to himself. "He'll need us. The Riverlands. Grandfather will be. He always liked to think us safe in winter. There is no winter that keeps out fire." His voice steadied as he spoke. "We call the banners." Catelyn laid a hand on his arm. His eyes were Eddard's when they found her, gray and grave. He was still her boy and already a man. "We will ride to Riverrun," she said. "We will be careful at the Twins. Lord Walder will open, if he thinks the King of the South will favor him for it," Robb said. "Robb," Catelyn said, and the name was both love and warning. "There is not one king in this. There are too many. Do not let another's crown make your head foolish." "I am my father's son," Robb said. "I will not break my word. I will not be drawn into feasts for the sake of them. If we cross for the Tullus, for the Riverlands, for father's command. We will not cross for games." The great John laughed when the call went out, so loud the hall of Winterfell shook, because laughter was how he answered fear, and because he had always wanted to fight in the Riverlands for the sheer taste of meat it promised. The Umbers came, the Karstarks with eyes like flint and grief in their blood, since one of their boys had fallen in the streets of King's Landing to Lannister steel. The Manderleys sent men and bread. Men grumbled. Steel was oiled. The direwolf's howls braided into the iron song of marching. In King's Landing, Renly Baratheon returned with 1,000 rose-colored men at his back and a grin sharpened to defiance. He demanded entrance to the small council and came with Loras Tyrell at his side like a blade in bloom. He had the ease of men who carry their own pleasures with them. "You would make the realm a battleground for your pride," Ned told him. "Stand with the law." Renly's eyes were bright and unrepentant. Stand with the law? The law that leaves my family to be judged by a man who keeps a red priestess in his chambers and talks of destiny like a knight talks of wine? I do not like your law, Stark. I have a different one. It says people will follow the man they can stand to look at over breakfast. Stannis is a sour prune. No realm chooses that if it can help it. You promised them feasts, Ned said. He would promise them just bread and honesty. Bread is not enough, Renly said, grinning. And honesty is a torture in court. I make this offer. Name me regent. I will marry Marjorie. The Reach will march. We will preempt Lord Tywin. Smash him before he crosses the Blackwater. And you can keep your scruples as a pet in your tower. Then, when the realm is quiet, we will call a council and sing songs about law. Law is not a song, Ned said, and I will not make it a joke to ease your ambition. I will hold the city for Stannis. If you will not join him, you are my enemy in this. Renly's face closed, a door slamming in a warm house. Then I am your enemy, he said, and took his 1,000 Tyrell men and his darling with him before dawn. The East Gate guard who let him through under cover of a foggy morning took a purse from Littlefinger that had been prepared before Ned had summoned him, and Ned learned about that too late to stop it. Stannis' ships came like a dark shoal moving at tide. He came himself, face carved from old disapproval, Davos at his shoulder, that odd, grounded man who smelled of salt and smuggled onions. And with them, at the back of a procession of honest ships, a vessel with bright flames carved at its prow and a woman upon it with hair like poured blood, and eyes that were too full of something to be thought calm. Melisandre of Asshai smiled in the way that fireplaces smile, warming or burning, and one could never be certain which until too late. In the throne room, Stannis mounted the steps without ceremony and did not sit. He looked at the Iron Throne with such distaste that Ned felt, absurdly, a small bond with him. Here was a man who had endured his duty so long there was no pliancy left in him. Here was a man who had no inclination for the game that had ensnared good men and turned them bad. You have held, Stannis said. He did not thank. You have delivered the city. You have made it harder than it had to be. I have made it lawful, Ned said, and saw the flash in the other man's eyes that said, law is only law if I call it such. But Stannis had more patience than Renly. He was flint, not tinder. Cersei and the children, Stannis said. In custody, Ned said. Unharmed. They are false issue, Stannis said. They will die. They are children, Ned said, and felt, as he always did, the old winter in his chest at the thought of killing innocents to make a point that might outlast them by a year or two. Joffrey is vicious and vain. Tommen is a boy with a soft heart. Myrcella is a young lady who loves her cats. Kill Cersei if you must. Kill me if you must. But if you kill the children, you will make the realm worse for it. Do you counsel me to forbear the law? Stannis' mouth was a tight line. I counsel you to use it to make justice. There is a difference, Ned said. There are ways. Send Joffrey to the wall. It is mercy that preserves order. The wall is law's mercy. The boy will be less harmed there than as a martyr. Tommen and Myrcella can be given into wardship at good houses that are not their mothers. There are septs if you fear them trained for rule. Melisandre stepped forward in silence, her face too luminous, her smile cut fine. The Lord of Light shows me shadows, she said, and her voice was like honey poured over iron. The boy is a shadow that will poison every well until he is unmade. The girl's mouth will speak honeyed lies at a crossroads of kings. The younger will wear a crown of beetle shells and call himself harmless while he crushes a beetle underfoot. Shadows must be burned. You would burn a child, Ned said, his voice roughening. There are names for you in the north. There are names for you in my tongue as well, she said pleasantly, as if they spoke of weather. Some cold, some kind. You are a man who makes himself a gate. But the night is long, and gates do not always hold. Davos, bless him, looked troubled. Lord, he said, scratching at his beard where fingers were missing. I was thinking, if a thing makes the realm run smoother, It's not a betrayal of the law to do the thing. Course I don't talk like maesters or mummers, but a dead boy doesn't help a live realm. Might not win you friends in the south. Burning kids. Stannis's jaw worked. He looked at the Iron Throne again as if it stank. He looked at Ned, and there was something like loathing and respect both. I will not burn children, he said finally, and Melisandre's eyes cooled. And she had the poise of a dancer who has stepped far ahead of the music and must wait. The bastard will go to the wall. The other two will be given into custody. The mother will face trial for treason. Ned let out a breath he had not admitted he was holding. You make a king's choice, he said. I make a hard one, Stannis answered. They feel similar at first bite. Joffrey was brought before them in the long hall, and he was every inch a boy who had been told the world had his face stamped into it. He tried to spit on Ned and, finding himself unable to lift so much as a gob of spit with his fear, settled for spitting words. You will die for this, he said to Stannis, who watched him as one watches a dog that has chosen to snarl at its master. I am the king. Mother says. Your mother's mouth will be closed by law, Stannis said. You will choose. The wall, to serve the realm you would have betrayed, or the sword. Joffrey's lip trembled and steadied. He glanced at the Hound, who stood uneasy because there were things he would do for the boy and things he would not, and this balance made him miserable. He glanced at Tommen, who stared at him with tears balanced like bright beads that would not fall unless given leave. He looked at Stannis and at the throne, and his eyes flared like an animal's. I will not wear black, he said, and his voice broke and the boy in him showed. I will not give up. You will hang, Stannis said, before he could say crown or life or something that would gut him of any grace he might have had. Ser Island, do your duty. Wait, Ned said. He found he had taken a step before he knew he had. He could not save that boy. He could only try to save the realm from what killing him in the throne room would make of them all. Let him go from the city. Let him ride with no arms but a dagger and 2 men to take him to the wall. He may run. He may be caught by men who hate him. He may arrive. But we will have done what we could not to make a martyr of a child. Stannis's face cut, but he was a man who had learned to listen to counsel he did not like. He will go at dusk, he said. And if he flees, he will be hunted like a traitor. This is my mercy and my law. He looked at Ned. You will answer for it with your head if it goes wrong. That seems fair, Ned said. It was not, but the world was not a ledger that balanced. Joffrey went at dusk. The Hound rode with him, Stannis's choice and Ned's consent, because if any man could keep the boy alive long enough to think, it was the man who had watched him be worse and had not yet lost his compulsion to keep him from being the worst he could be. 2 black brothers met them at the king's gate with cloaks ready. They melted into the dark with their odd, unassuming confidence. When they told the boy that on the wall his name would be his own again and his past a story that men could choose not to tell, he showed, for one heartbeat, the face of someone less monstrous. Then the city swallowed them. Cersei's trial was a quieter thing, terrible in its quiet. She sat clothed in penitence, hair bound modestly, wrists bare of any trinket. She was accused of treason, of adultery, of placing false issue upon the throne. The maester's book lay on a stand. The book that had given Ned his certainty lay open to pages with hair-color lineage and the iron logic that had made him unafraid to speak. Pycelle mumbled histories and quivered when Stannis fixed him with a father's stare. Lancel wept and told the truth badly. Barristan testified softly about a boy born strong and dark to an older brother long ago and how genealogies sometimes spoke like bells. The court listened in a kind of rapture, because there are no stories finer in court than misdoings wrapped in jewels. Cersei listened too. She did not weep. She did not plead. When given leave to speak, she lifted her chin and made a last gift to the world that had always taken from her. The realm is a coop, she said. Men strut, they crow, they preen, they peck. You think this law of yours is a thing not made by cocks and kept for cocks? I took what I could in a world that kept what it wanted from me. The boy you will hang or send to freeze was the one person who ever loved me without price. She smiled then for Jaime alone. Ned felt something move in him, an old sad knowledge. How love trained in the wrong place becomes a weapon. Do your law, she said. It will not make you better. It will only make you feel better. Stannis passed sentence without flourish. It was his way. Cersei Lannister, you are guilty. You will not hang. You will be given to the Silent Sisters. Your tongue will no longer be a blade. You will not speak again. Melisandre's eyes glittered. She looked disappointed as a child denied a sweet. Cersei closed her mouth as if sealing a kiss forever. It was a cruelty that wore Mercy's face. Ned accepted it because the alternative was worse. Tommen and Myrcella went, one to Riverrun to be fostered among Tullis and their sept, one to White Harbor to learn courtesy and bread, and what Mercy a lord who loved feasts and justice might teach. Ned spoke with them both before they left. Myrcella curtsied and nodded. Tommen cried and clung and asked, at the last, if Ser Pounce could come. Ned found that he could give one mercy where so many were denied. Yes, he said, and Tommen's fat tears melted into a smile that had no idea how the world would use him. Ned thought he will be all right, and then he thought, perhaps he will not, and then he let him go. The riverlands burned and bled. Robb came down like a winter stream in spate, with the Umbers howling and the Karstarks grim with their justice and the tall hearts steady. He sent riders to split Tywin's feints, and he moved too fast for a boy if you believe boys slow and fools if you believe them foolish. Catelyn watched her son become his father in the ways that made her most proud and most afraid. At the twins, Lord Walder squeezed until he squeaked, and Catelyn soothed and threatened, and Robb gave a promise he hated but could bear if it meant the army flowed instead of damming. Alliance for crossing, a match sealed in the book, words chosen like chess. The North crossed and the world tilted on its hinge. There was no whispering wood, because Jaime was not there to be seized. There was instead a fight under a sky white with high cloud, near a mill by the Red Fork, where Adam Marbrand's riders tried to sweep the Starks like a broom and found themselves broken on Karstark lances and turned by gray wind who came out of river fog like something from an old song that had learned to bite. Robb broke them and sent their pennons down like autumn leaves, and men in leather jerkins cheered and men in plate groaned prayers and died. He did not win easily. He won because he was not yet tired and because the North had come to teach the Riverlands how to be stubborn again. At Spofford, Kevin Lannister had the golden tooth like a plug in a bottle. He held, and he would have held for months, but the Manderleys sent more men than men expected from a city of fish and law, and Robb sent them around by night with men of the mountain trails to climb where the walls forgot their watchers, and dawn found the gatehouse with a Stark banner flying on it and Kay. Evan swearing with a soldier's clean rage. He withdrew in good order. He did not break or run. He was a Lannister of the sanest sort, which meant he fought as if nothing were personal. Catelyn saw him ride away in a dust cloud and thought, Tywin is learning that his cleverest son is not the one he has left. In King's Landing, the small folk did what small folk do. They made new songs, they made bread, they made bargains. They watched the city with new eyes. The Gold Cloaks found themselves forced to be honest more often than they liked under Ser Desmond's hard stare. Varys moved, always, as a man whose only country is information. Littlefinger smiled and went about collecting coin with a greed disguised as charm. Ned found that holding a city with a king was harder than holding it without one. Stannis expected obedience like a habit he had paid for. He bore no humor and gave no pardons to men who made mistakes while remarking on their own cleverness. You will marry your daughters into houses that suit my realm, Stannis told him one morning without prelude. You will remain my hand until I see fit to remove you. I did not ask for removal, Ned said. I did not offer you the choice, Stannis replied without malice. Your son is plying war well for a boy. See that he obeys. I will not have northern notions of separate crowns. The law is one, as the realm is one. The North is loyal, Ned said. We want quiet and bread. We will accept your law where it is just. Where it is not, we will argue. That is my service to you, and you may have my head when you grow tired of it. That, Stannis said, is nearer to useful than most men come. He paused. I understand you had a sister once. It was an odd, blunt thing to say, too personal for his usual manner. I did, Ned said. The world stole from you in a way that made you obstinate, Stannis said, as if reading from a paper written by someone who liked him more than he deserved. I am obstinate because I was overlooked. Between us, the realm may find itself served. It was the nearest thing to a compliment Ned would ever get from that man, and he kept it like a warm stone in his pocket in the days to come. Renly did not idle. He took his reachmen and his charm and declared himself king on the field with banners bright as gardens. He married Marjorie in a pavilion that smelled of crushed mint and spiced lamb, and the lords of the Reach acclaimed him because he was golden with a different light than a Lannister's, and because the Tyrells could make a man king if they decided they liked the crown that year. He sent a letter to King's Landing that called Stannis sour, winterish, unlovely. He sent another that described Ned in terms half admiration, half frustration, as if he were writing of a mule that could carry twice its weight but would not be made to turn when you wanted. Will you fight him? Davos asked in a quiet corner where candlelight turned maps into islands of uncertainty. I will ask him to yield, Stannis said. He will not. Then I will fight him. Ned said nothing because what else could be done? He could no more make Renly bend than he could make rivers flow north. He could try to shape the manner of their breaking. If you must meet him, he said finally, do it far from the city. Do not make the small folk in the path of kings bleed for crowns they will never wear. We do not choose where wars are fought, Stannis said. Roosters choose high ground for their battles. Men choose roads and granaries. He rubbed his jaw thoughtfully. But you are right. Cost him to say it. We will draw him west. He will not want to lose the path to King's Landing while he plays. Tyrion's usefulness in his father's army turned out to be a matter of patience. He drank less and listened more. He found that men told him things he could not have pulled from them at sword point if he let them laugh at him first. He prevented 3 minor lords from defecting by offering one a brothel with attentive girls, one a seat on the town council of his home, one a simple promise to leave his sons unmolested. He wrote letters that made other letters blush to think of their lack of wit. He sent a quiet rider to Littlefinger in King's Landing with a note that simply said, "We can fatten each other." Littlefinger sent back, "I prefer to feed myself, but lean men are so unpleasant to dine with." He sent coin. Tyrion tucked the exchange away and learned all he could about wildfire. "You thinking of burning a city?" Bronn asked, impressed. "Gods, no," Tyrion said. "I am thinking of how men who want to burn cities can be made to burn themselves instead." He thought of the woman in red and the way men's eyes slid to her as if she were a light in fog and they were sailors longing for harbor and not realizing the rocks just under. The first time Robb saw Tywin Lannister across a field was under a sky the color of cold iron. They faced each other with a river between, banners like a field of flowers to those who didn't know the scent of blood. Tywin sat his horse as if he were himself a siege engine. Robb sat with gray wind beside him, the wolf's fur lifting and falling with the breeze. The music of the field was thick, 1,000 small sounds that make a larger silence. They did not speak across the water. They did not posture. They watched. Men who watch well no more than men who talk loudly. "He doesn't think he can lose," Robb said to Catelyn later, when the maps reared up under their fingers. "Not because of pride, because he doesn't know what losing looks like. He thinks it is a thing other men have the decency to do when he suggests it." "Do not try to teach him humility," Catelyn said. "Kill him if you can, and if you cannot, deny him what he needs." They denied him shoes and oats and a bridge at Ruby Ford. They denied him gossip that could hold his allies. Tyrion outbid them thrice and still lost a lord to the North's quiet persistence because the man's wife had once been given bread at White Harbor when she was a girl. Catelyn found herself writing more letters than she had ever imagined writing. She had thought war a matter of steel. It was a matter of ink as well. In the end, Renly and Stannis could not avoid each other forever. They met not in the Blackwater's shadow but in the Vale of Ashford, on ground that had seen knights prance and men die before. The Reach came in laughter and green. Storm's End came in iron and grim banners with stags that looked as if they might lower their antlers at any who came near. Melisandre stood behind Stannis at the council tent and said little. Loras Tyrell glowed like a boy saint. He was very fine and very brave, and the world will sometimes give such boys long lives and sometimes snatch them away to make girls cry in the back of seps. Davos chewed at the absence where his fingers were and kept his counsel sound. "I will not bend," Renly said, as they parleyed in a pavilion that smelled of trampled grass. "You will break," Stannis said without rancor. "There is a third way," Renly said cheerfully. "I win." It was an ugly fight, the kind that made bards lie when they sang about it later. The green tide crashed, and the stags lowered their antlers, and men died with mud in their boots and tears on their cheeks for mothers far away. There was no shadow baby crawling from a royal womb. There were only men doing the infamous labor of deciding who would sit a chair and in what name bread would be taxed. But there was wildfire. Barrels of it rolled and broke and made the plain into patches of false sunlight, and men learned what dragons had made of cities long ago by accident. The Tyrells burned worst where their banners whipped in the friendly wind they thought was theirs. Davos saw where the fire liked to creep and got men and water there, and Stannis saw and learned, and the next barrel took a different path and made a different horror. In the end, Renly did not die that day. He lost. He withdrew with half the green torn black, and he did not smile on the ride away. Stannis stood in the smoke and looked like a man who has counted all the coins in a purse and found exactly what he expected to find. King's Landing, when they returned, was a city that had learned to believe in cold law. It did not cheer Stannis. It did not strew flowers. It opened its gates, paid its taxes, took its grain, lined up its small criminals, and saw them judged with a stricter hand than Robert's careless mercy had preferred. It was a cleaner city in a way and a harder one. Ned walked its streets with a small escort and listened to the gossip a city makes for itself. The talk held less of Lannister and more of prices. He decided it was an improvement of a kind. Arya showed him a bruise and a knife trick and told him Syrio had taught her something he should learn. He told her he had no time for lessons, and she scowled and made time for him anyway, which is to say she showed him the trick until he could repeat its steps and then laughed when he botched it in a way that would have cut his own thigh if the knife were not a blunted practice blade. Sansa listened to songs less and to Septa Mordain more and asked fewer questions about what love ought to fix. She was becoming something harder than a song would like. He did not know if the world would reward or punish her for it. One night in the Hand Solar, with the city's hum like a sea below, Littlefinger came and made his offer. He laid it on the table like a jeweler laying out trinkets. "This lord will bend if you let him keep a tax on ferry rights. This wharf master can be made to find ships where none exist if you let him skim. This Sellsword company can be had cheap if you let them loot a town you do not care for. There is law," he said, smiling and utterly pleasant. "And there is the way the realm goes. You catch more fish with a net that leaves a hole or two. Otherwise you fill your net with rocks and come home hungry." Ned looked at him as at a man who had been born with clean hands and had made them dirty on purpose to see what it felt like. "I will feed the realm with bread," he said, "and we will catch our fish one at a time if we must." "You are going to die poor," Littlefinger said, with something like admiration that did not reach his eyes. "I will die empty-handed," Ned said. "That is not the same." He slept poorly that night, and dreamed of snow that did not melt even when spring had the decency to try. He dreamed of a boy with hair like a raven's wing riding north under a weight he had chosen. He woke before dawn and stood beside the window while the city stretched and yawned. He wondered, for the first time since the sword fell in the yard, whether he had made a great mistake that was also the only choice he had been allowed. He would make 1,000 more such mistakes if given the chance. That is the secret of men who try to be good in a world that cares more for winning than goodness. They learn to live with the things they cannot mend. Word came from the Riverlands by Raven, in a scroll that smelled faintly of river water and blood. Robb wrote with a hand steadier than his mother's. His news was steady as well. Kevin had retreated to Harrenhal, the old black shell that held all the ghosts of old kings to keep him company. Robb would not chase a man who had chosen to be a rat in a ruin. He would encircle and deny, and he would spare his men the disease that lived in the marsh near that ancient stone. Tywin had split his force. He was no longer a single fist. He was fingers probing, looking for a weakness in a hard wall. The north was learning to be a wall. The riverlands, bleeding, learned to be mortar. There were smaller tragedies along the way. A sept burned by mountain men who were not the mountains. A Tully cousin found with his throat cut in a stream where he had come to wash blood from his hair. A Karstark boy slain by fever that came up from a wound as if out of the ground. Catelyn wrote of them in her hand and looked at the letters afterward as if expecting them to resolve into stories where evil is punished and good rewarded if only you keep reading. They did not. They never do without help. She offered prayer and bread and work. It was not enough. It had to be enough. When winter's first true wind touched King's Landing, winter in the south meaning only that men wore cloaks on the bridges and women breathed steam in the mornings, news came from the east with the thin sharpness of a new blade. A girl with dragons. A khalasar shattered and reformed around a heart of fire. Men died in cities they thought safe because old tales had grown a new spine. Ned read those words and felt the old chill again. The realm could not bear another king while it fought so hard to hold the ones it had. And yet the world never asks what it can bear before putting another weight upon its shoulders. He went to Stannis with that intelligence. The king listened with his face in its normal discontent and his mind in its usual ruthless clarity. "If it is true," he said, "we will need a fleet that can do more than carry onions. We will need a hand who can manage men who think themselves clever." He fixed Ned with a look almost sly. It was the barest suggestion of mirth Stannis had ever allowed his mouth. "Do you know anyone like that?" "I know a man who can count and another who can fight and a third who can pray," Ned said. "Few men do all three, and fewer yet do one well." "Choose the least foolish," Stannis said. "I am tired of foolishness." Tyrion Lannister sent a note to King's Landing at about the same time, via a courier who had once carried pies and now carried paper. Said, "There is a girl with dragons. My father wants to pretend dragons can be bribed. If you have any wit, you will ask yourself whether a law can hold a dragon and what it takes to teach dragons to prefer paper to fire." He signed it Tyrion Lannister because he had learned that names can weigh a thing down so it doesn't fly away in the wind. Ned read it and smiled grimly. He sent back, "I prefer bread to both paper and fire, but if I must choose, I will choose the one that doesn't kill my children." He did not sign it with love. That was not what they were to each other, and yet in another telling of the world there might have been space for liking. He had no time for that world. He had this one. There was no song to wrap up what they had done. They had killed a man in a yard and sent a boy to the end of the world and put a woman who had been cruel to silence she had surely earned. They had cut away a war that would have burned the city while planting the seeds of a different war in different fields. Catelyn stood by the tumblestone and watched leaves fall into it and did not know whether to call it victory. Robb learned to sleep in armor. Sansa learned to write letters that did not say what they said. Arya learned that running is a skill worth having even when you are not chased. Tyrion learned to bargain with men he once would have mocked and found, to his surprise, that he preferred being useful to being amusing. Stannis learned that mercy could be a tool when applied like vinegar to soak off rust from stubborn iron. Melisandre learned that men who would not be charmed could sometimes be outlasted. She was patient in a way that honored her god. And Ned Stark, who had chosen a path at dawn and not flinched when the world's golden head tumbled into straw, learned that a man can be right and still be miserable, and that the misery itself is not proof that you must stop. He walked the halls at night and listened to the city breathe and thought of winter coming properly, of snows that would be real not metaphor, of things in the far north that did not care whether boys were king or girls were queens. He thought of Bran, and the raven he dreamed, and a tree that remembered things older than law. He thought of the children asleep in their chambers and the wolves that warmed their feet and the sound of wind under doors. He thought of a promise he had once made at a bed where a woman lay dying and a blue flower wilted in water. He thought, "I am keeping faith as I know how. It is not clean and it is not kind and it is not simple, but it is faith kept." One dawn, when sea mist had not yet lifted and the gulls wrote their course script upon the air, a black-cloaked rider came in through the king's gate with a boy in a hood and a man with half a face. The rider had the solemn look of men who carry oaths like packs they do not intend to put down. He gave no name, he gave a letter. The hand read it with his jaw set. The boy in the hood did not look up. He stood with his shoulders hunched as if they could learn to be a wall against the world. When he raised his head at last, his eyes were a color Ned had known as a danger once. They were less dangerous now. They were just eyes. He was 16 and already old. "Will you take your vows?" Ned asked him softly. The boy swallowed. He looked not at the man who had spared him, and not at the king, and not at the steel around him, but at the black brothers who had come to fetch him to the long cold. He nodded. "Good," Ned said. "Then go. Make yourself a man there. Let me never hear your name again. Live." Joffrey did not thank him. Boys like that do not thank the men who take their crowns away and give them their lives back in exchange. But as he passed, the hound paused and gave Ned a look that was not gratitude and not respect, but something with both in it. It would have to do. News that day was a roll of drums. Renly had retreated to Bitterbridge and then to High Garden, where a marriage bed sometimes makes a better fortification than a wall. Tywin had pulled in his fingers and turned his hand toward bleeding the Westerlands instead, because there is a point at which even great lords choose to defend what has their name burned into it rather than what promises might get them if held. The girl with dragons had crossed a desert that sane men did not cross and found a city that would make her a queen if she would give it more than she took. Winter crept a little nearer. The realm shivered and told itself it was just a draft. At dusk, Ned went to the yard where men trained and watched Ser Barristan correct a young white sword's grip with the same gentle hands he would use to cradle a bird. "We cannot keep doing this," he said without greeting. He had learned with Barristan that words could be put like swords on a stand and allowed to catch light there without being drawn. "We can," Barristan said. "We must. We are holding together a realm with string," Ned said. Barristan looked up at the sky, which was making a brave show of being pink and harmless. "String can hold a great deal if you tie enough knots." Ned thought about knots and how his fingers were not as good with them as he would like. He thought of the day in the yard and the blade coming down and the things that had followed. He thought, "I would do it again." Then he thought, "I must find ways to do fewer things that require finishing with steel." "Northern men have a proverb about snow," Barristan said, as if reading his mind. "There is no bad weather, only poor clothing. Perhaps law is like that. We cannot change what comes. We can only choose how to meet it." Ned smiled in spite of himself. "You are wiser than you let men think." "I am older than I let them think," Barristan said. "Age gives some men wisdom and others only a longer time to practice being fools." They stood there a while, two men who had lived most of their lives doing work that other men only talk about until it is time to do it. When the lamps were lit and the city glowed like a low bed of coals, Ned went to his study. N.D. began another letter. There would be 1,000 more. There would be maps and councils and arguments with Stannis that ended in grudging agreement and arguments with Littlefinger that ended in the discovery that he had stolen a piece off the board while you weren't watching. There would be ravens that brought bad news and a few that brought something like relief. There would be a day when he would have to ask the realm to bleed again for a threat that did not wear silk and did not speak a courtly tongue. A threat that walked on winter. He would be told he was mad. He would be told to leave old stories to old women. He would find a way anyway. He would do it because he had chosen a dawn once, and all dawns lead to others. In the black cells, below the Red Keep, where men were kept who needed time to decide whether they would speak or die silent, Littlefinger sat with a candle and practiced making the flame dance with the flicker of his breath. He was not imprisoned. He would never be, not while he kept one foot in shadow and one in sunlight. He smiled and considered all the ladders he could still climb. None of them were as tall as they had been, now that a man from the north had learned to cut rungs off when he found men climbing in the dark. But the walls were high and there were always windows. On Dragonstone, Melisandre watched the sea with half-shut eyes and saw things that had not yet happened, and things that would never happen but would haunt men who thought they had. She saw a boy on a wall looking down at a sea of white. She saw a girl in a place of snow with a blade thin as a tongue. She saw a woman with dragons weighing 3 roads and choosing the one that offered her the fewest deaths of children. She saw a man in a dark hall folding a letter and looking up at the ceiling as if an answer were written there, invisible ink waiting to be warmed. She smiled. Fire was patient. Fire did not insist. Fire ate when it could and waited when it must. In the Riverlands, where men mended fences because men had torn them, Caitlin walked with her father along a path that had seen more horses than could be counted and listened as the old man tried to remember a song he had loved. He could not. The song would not come when called. She held his hand anyway. She thought of Jaime's head falling. She thought of the clean mercy in ugly acts and the ugly necessity in clean laws. She thought of boys becoming men and girls becoming women because the world will not slow for any mother's wish. She did not know what the bards would call this chapter of the realm's story. Something with kings in it, no doubt. Something with honor. She was too honest to think honor anything but a name men put on choices after they made them. Ned wrote, and judged, and chose, and bore. He went to the godswood they had made in the city, a poor thin thing with a sapling heart, and stood there at times to hear the leaves tell him nothing useful. He went anyway. Men keep faith with the things that keep faith with them, even if faith means only that a tree lets a man stand under it when it rains. The city slept. The realm did not. The sword had fallen once, and its echo would knock cups from tables for years. You could say the world had changed because a man chose to kill another man at dawn. You could say it had only taken the shape it would have taken anyway along a different seam. Both things could be true. Ned Stark, who had given the order and had not flinched, learned to live with truths that did not fit neatly together. He had a wife who loved him in the fierce practical way that keeps men fed and armies supplied. He had children who made him fear and hope in equal measure. He had a king who would never be beloved and might be exactly what the realm required until it learned to require something else. He had a winter walking toward him that would not care for any of it. He set himself as a gate. He tied his knots. He wrote his letters. He stood his watches. He made his mistakes large and his victories modest. He held. And in times to come, when men said the name Kingslayer, some said it with a new tone. Not softer, not crueler. Different. They told different stories about him in different taverns. In some, he had cursed the north as the blade fell. In some, he had laughed. In one, told by a quiet man with eyes that had seen much and learned to speak little, he had looked at the sky and said nothing because there was nothing to say. Stories change. The world does not care. It moves forward. It breathes. When the first true snow fell on King's Landing, a scant dusting that melted as it touched the cobbles, Arya ran her hands through it and tried to catch it and grinned like a fox. Sansa watched from a window and thought of white cloaks and white lies and white winters and their violences. Ned stood on the balcony and let a flake melt on his cheek. He did not make a wish. He was too old for that. He made instead the inventory of a man who knows exactly what he can control and what he cannot. He turned back to the room where maps were spread and letters waited to be sealed. He had work. He would always have work now. He went to it,